All right, friends, welcome back to the Blessed Family. I'm here once again with my beautiful wife, Mrs. Amy Dodd, and we're going to do something a little different today. We're going to tell our story, which is kind of humbling, but it's because people often ask, like, hey, so what do you guys do? Where have you been? Because, we've moved around a bit over the years, and our ministry is tweaked. And so this is just a quick testimony or quick sharing overview of our lives. The last 20 years. We'll be married 20 years in March.
We will.
Pretty cool.
That is pretty crazy.
What are we going to do for our 20-year anniversary?
Probably stay home.
Stay home.
And get pizza, or I don't even know, Thai food.
I thought you were going to say get pregnant. Anyways, okay. It seems to be the trend. All right, so our story, well,
not our trend, because we have a baby born every single month, different month.
That's true. That takes talent.
Yeah. Yep.
So we have 10 children born in 10 different months.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. March and September are the two openings.
Yes.
So, okay. So I was born and raised in Texas. This beautiful one was born in Alaska and then moved to Montana and then Pennsylvania and then Wisconsin.
Yes.
And we met in Wisconsin in the late 90s, maybe 98. I think it was winter of 98.
I was 14.
Wow.
You were probably 19.
And we had no idea we were going to get married.
No, actually, when I first met him, because I remember meeting you for the very first time.
I remember meeting you too.
And I remember they introduced him, and I can't remember if you were helping with youth group or what it was, but I remember looking at him and just being like, one of my first thoughts was, he's probably like 30 years old, which is so funny to me, because now when I look at pictures of you at 19, you look like a little kid. Yeah. But when I first met you, my first thought was, wow, he's an old man.
Thank you, sweetheart. Our relationship could only go up from there.
Exactly.
So I was in Bible school in Wisconsin. She went to a semester of Bible school. In 2003, we confessed our feelings for each other. We had a little bit of a dramatic.
Was that, yeah. We first got together in 2002, I think, right? Got engaged in 2003. Oh, no, we got together in 2003.
Yeah, beginning of 2003.
We maybe should have, rehearsed this first.
And then,
just
so 2003 was a fun, but,
So I had graduated, just for anyone who I graduated high school already. So Jared, the summer before my senior year of high school, he actually started liking me and told one of his buddies. And of course, I was still in school, so he was working at the church. So
his friends.
Try to bring that down. You couldn't act on it.
Yeah, sure.
But I wasn't thinking about him all that way. But it is interesting because in my psychology class, in my only semester senior year, because I graduated early, I remember the class made a big circle around, and the teacher asked everybody two questions. One, do we believe in life after death? Some question like that. And only two people, me and one other person, actually brought up that we believed in Christ and that, there's life after death. Everybody else was either atheist or some crazy thing. So, and it was a big class. And then the other question was, who are your best friends? And so I'm 17 years old and listed off Jared and Miss Kay Brennan, who's now married, last name Boyovich now, but as my two best friends. So this was all before any of that. But so let's say fast forward about 7 months later or so, I'm 18, I graduated. Jared says, hey, I like you. I freak out and walk away because
she couldn't believe it. She was like, I've been praying for this for years.
I didn't really know what to think. And but then I came back 3 days later, poor guy, and said, hey, I like you too.
Yeah, she left me hanging at the beginning, but it was all good. And then, so we got engaged November of 2003, got married in March, for a 4-month engagement, which was about 3.5 months too long. And Jared was born in 2005.
Yes.
Isaiah was born in 2006. I was a pastor at the church. And in 2006, we decided to be missionaries over in the tribes of Asia is where we were targeting. And so we went down to Missouri to mission school. That was a lot of fun. So this mission school with 150 people our age and like-minded, and we would throw parties. It was a blast.
Everybody training to be foreign missionaries. It was a blast.
Pilots, hanging out with the pilots, with the bush pilots. But a few weeks, and I flew over to the Philippines where my sister and brother-in-law were, and we were going to be missionaries together on an island, and we were going to raise our boys spearfishing, and it was going to be great. But God called us back to Wisconsin.
But to Mexico first.
To Mexico first, yes.
The church in Wisconsin said, hey, we don't want you to go to the Philippines anymore. We want you to go down to Mexico, learn Spanish, and come back and start a Latino ministry. So we picked up
muy bien.
And we moved to Mexico for 6 months, which was super fun. Jared and Isaiah were born.
Yeah. They were 2 and 1.
And then we went back to Wisconsin, and then Jared became the associate pastor there and Latino pastor and started
did the Latino thing for a year, but that's when, working with my best friend up there, Luke Dye, God unraveled for us the mysteries of discipleship, and the Dio trilogy began. And we started training, and we did that for 4 years. And after that, I told my wife, and so Ivy and Jed were born.
Yes.
And I told my wife, I said, this training is so incredible that God's given us, which you can check out the Dio trilogy on our website or at Right Now Media. We said, we need to go somewhere else. And we said, well,
yeah, the training was changing people's lives in such a way that, but it was just staying in the 4 little walls of the church, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we're like, man, this is changing people's lives. Let's go and try to implement this maybe in some other churches. And we didn't know at that time that it was going to get on Right Now Media, but like, just for example, when Jared was doing taking a bunch of men through it, he did phase 1 and phase 3 at that time. Phase 2, what had not been written yet. Jared and Luke had not come up with phase 2 yet, but he had wrote, it was like a 9-month thing. You weren't allowed to miss a week, if I recall. Like, it was pretty strict at the time. It was pretty strict. But anyway, at the end of that 9 months, they were going to have a men's advance. They didn't call them retreats. They called them advance. And Jared decided to write some of the wives, asking them questions, because he was getting good feedback from the guys, like, oh yeah, this is life-changing. And Jared's like, well, it would really be life-changing if the wives have noticed a difference. So he started writing some of these wives, like, hey, how's your husband doing? Has he changed? What has he learned? And you had wives coming back saying that they were ready to leave their husbands, and he's a completely different person. How their husband struggled with anger, doesn't struggle with anger anymore. And really then, cool. and then the women, you saw very similar things happening with the women. And Jared and I were so impacted, like, holy smokes, what's happening? So we moved.
Yep. Yeah. Wow, this is so great. God's at work here. Let's go.
Which was hard, but it was good at the same time.
Aren't you glad we did, though?
Yeah. I mean, things happen.
So we moved here in 2012. And we had 4 kids. You were pregnant with Joby.
Yes, I was.
And we moved in with my parents. Which is always fun.
We had Job, and then we adopted Ruby.
But we moved out of my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, we moved up on the hill, and then we moved out to Smithwick.
But we had Job, and then like 3 weeks after Joby was born, we got an email it was a phone call. And anyway, long story short, Ruby's birth mom wanted us to adopt Ruby. We adopted Ruby 9 months after Job was born, and then let's see, I guess our next big thing would have been Guatemala.
Yeah, so we were here in Texas from 2012 from January to 2015. So basically 2.5, 3 years. And we did ministry in many of the churches here. Like, we probably taught 500 people, at least.
I don't even know.
And it was good. It was really good, making good friends, seeing lives change. And I just get bored sometimes.
He's a visionary. If you've watched this channel or listened to the podcast enough, you hear me all the time saying he's 100% visionary.
Yeah, so I was like, this is great. God's at work, but I need an adventure. So why don't we take my wife and 6 young kids to the jungles of Guatemala?
Where she's never been before. Yeah. So Jared had been asked.
That's since when you know you got an awesome wife.
Since we knew Spanish from living in Mexico, he had been asked to be a translator for another group that had gone to Guatemala. So Jared went with that other group for 2 weeks, I think, as a translator, and then came home and he was like, Amy, we're going. So we decided that we would go there and try to then implement that Dio training that we have we start a church there and implement Dio in Guatemala.
So let me tell this story. This is a cool story of what God did. So I thought we were going to be in Guatemala for 2 to 3 years to reach these churches up in the mountains. And there's a guy there named Greg, missionary Greg, and he's lived there 30 years, married a Guatemalan, 3 Guatemalan daughters. I mean, this guy is doing a great job. And I met him on that short-term trip, and he told me, he said, Jared, when you come back, when I was coming back, he goes, let me meet you in the capital, which is about 4 hours away from his place. He goes, I'll help you find a car. It's a big deal. Because I had to get a 4-wheel drive diesel Jeep to go up in the mountains. Very, very cool. They have cars there that we aren't allowed to have here. I don't know why, but I wish we could because it's really cool. Anyways, So I'm cruising down the main city, Guatemala City, with Greg, and he goes, "Hey, what do you do? Like, what's your mission?" And I said, "Oh, well, we have this discipleship training, and typically when I meet other ministers, I just like, I like to bless them, ask them questions." So I said very little, and that was it. And so he gets me the car. Amy and I move out to
About 4 or 5 hours away from
what was the city called? Hocatan.
Hocotan, but we were in Camotan.
So we're in Camotan. There's no white people anywhere. And a couple weeks later, we get a knock on our door, and it's Greg with a couple of his missionary sidekicks. I'm like, dude, how did you find me?
How did you even find
Because I was an
us?
hour and a half away the other side of his place. He goes, "Oh, I just drove around saying, where's the white people?" It's crazy because there are thousands of people there. I mean, it's not like a small town.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Dude, I cannot get our conversation out of my mind. I want to know what you do." So I said, "Well, let me teach you. I mean, the best way is to teach you, give you the first lesson." He said, "Okay." So he came in, he had his two Guatemalans, and I taught him the first lesson. And at the end, he said, "Jared, we are going to translate all 3 of these books into Spanish." And he goes, "I oversee 12 churches up in the mountains. We're going to teach this to all those churches." And when he left, I went back to him and I said, "Okay, change of plans. We aren't going to stay here for 2 to 3 years, even though that would have been great. We're going to stay here long enough to give Greg everything we have." And that was 7 months.
Yeah,
For
so
7 months.
so Jared ended up teaching some of the discipleship in churches and with some of the locals that just lived around us. But then a lot of it was Jared training Greg and his native team in Dio, and then they went back to their churches because we never in 9 months could have raised 12
No
churches
way.
up. So it was really incredible. And he's written us a couple of times since we left. So we left there in 2016?
2015.
2015. He's written us a couple times since then saying just all the change in the churches and how great it's been, and so it ended up being a blessing, which only I think books 1 and 2 ended up getting translated because
Book 3 is too thick.
obedience is the biggest book in the universe. But so that was Guatemala, and again we had a really great time.
We would go up. I mean, we were always together. I mean, I would go up in the mountains, but very often I'd take kids with me or take Amy with me. And
we wish the kids would remember more because they were ended up being too young.
My hope was one of the main motives for going was this is going to change my kids' life because they're going to see a third world country and see, but they really didn't remember.
Yeah, they don't really remember. But so then we came back. We tried to settle down in Kentucky. Didn't really work.
Yeah,
came
we
back
wanted
to Texas.
Oh, well, that's too fast of a version of that.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
No, we're okay on time. So
Okay.
we wanted to homestead. We've always wanted homestead.
Yeah.
Amy's parents had moved to eastern Kentucky, where land was at that time it might still be $1,000 or less an acre. And I was like, and, we aren't made of money, so I was like, man, we can actually do this. And we've done our job in Central Texas. Let's go to Kentucky. We were there for 5 months.
So yeah, 6-ish.
6 months. Made offers on 4 different homes. And God, by His grace, closed the door. We just weren't supposed to be there. And so we're frustrated now. It's December of 2015, and Amy's like, "I don't know what to do." I'm like, "I don't know what to do. Where do we go?" And me with my visionary thing, I'm like, "Okay, Italy. I don't know." And I got a call from my friend who has died since, Kyle McAllister, may he rest in peace, amazing man. And he said, "Jared, I'm taking a team to Israel. I've got 1 empty seat. Someone canceled or they can't come because of circumstances. You want to go? It's paid for." I'd never been to Israel. I was like, "No, I can't. I got my family." And Amy's like, great wife. She's like, "No, you need to go." So I went, and I really felt like God was going to tell us on this trip where we're supposed to be. And the whole time I'm there, I don't know if it's just because Israel and Texas are on the same
Well, I think it's because you went with a group of Texans.
But I called Amy after a couple of days, or wrote her. I said,
I really feel like we should go back to Texas.
And she, of course, being the amazing woman, she's like, "All right." And we started looking at homes. We moved back in January of 2016, bought this house. This is the longest we've ever lived anywhere. In the first 12 years of marriage, we lived in 12 different places or something like that.
It was even,
We were moving around
12 years, 14 places or something.
And but we've been here, and since we've come here, we've had Jubilee, we've had Genesis, we've had Eden, and we've had Abraham. And we've written books, we've done podcasts, right now media stuff.
Jared got was getting more speaking gigs, and it was getting really hard for us to travel in our van because we'd have to travel in this little van, stop at gas stations, stop at restaurants, stop at motels, and it was actually not,
Yeah,
I
it
don't
just
know, the
wasn't that
greatest
fun.
experience with so many people. And so we were looking at Class A RVs, and we're like, okay,
Too much
never
money.
in a million years are we ever going to be able to afford anything like this. We're just destined for a 12-passenger
And
van.
then Mike Mowry, elder in our church, he said, "Hey, I found a school bus." And long story short, we've had a schoolie now for 3 years. We're about to leave in a few days for Kentucky and Pennsylvania, and it's been awesome.
And it's great. We're spoiled rotten
So
in the
we've
school bus.
started speaking in homeschool conventions and family camps, and it's been good.
It's been
really
great.
good. And
To be continued.
to be continued. All right, so that was fun, huh?
That was great. I hope that
Yeah.
you enjoyed it.
You're not listening to this anymore. You left about 12 minutes ago, but all right, friends. Well, hey, you know what? That's our story, and it's full of God's grace, and I guarantee you that your story is full of God's grace, and I can also guarantee you that God is not finished with any of us. He's good. He's going to complete the good work he began. So be encouraged. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.